Hey, Roger Martin, Neighborhood Buildings, Montana. Good day. I have hope that we're going to get better news out in the future, and some of this comes through Fox News, a lot of it through conservative groups. Here goes.
Welcome back. Breaking news this morning on support for democracy and freedom rising in the Middle East and Asia. In Iran, protests in the street after the country's leaders admit mistakenly shooting down a Ukrainian jetliner, killing all 176 people on board.
Well, I mean, that's big stuff, big stuff. Now, this is in Taiwan Saturday. People are getting a drift that they want freedom. They want out of these political debacles, leadership abuses.
In Taiwan, voters are celebrating this weekend the island's pro-democracy leader winning re-election. Again, people in the streets wanting freedom and democracy. And in Hong Kong, protesters holding up the American flag as they continue to
Make Hong Kong great again. It's interesting how picture of President Trump and the Premier of Hong Kong. Uh, you know, this, and I'm right in the middle. This has to be very disalarming for Hong Kong. China's going to get its upcomings one way or another. Iran, these people are rising up, demanding stuff. We hope that they'll get leadership in there that will be pro-Iranian, pro-freedom. We'll see.
fight for freedom. Joining me right now and what it all means for America is former White House chief strategist, host of the hit podcast, wildly successful War Room. Steve Bannon is here. Steve, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Reaction to what's taking place across the world.
Look, this is the Trump doctrine, whether it's in Hong Kong, at the ballot box in Taiwan, in the streets of Tehran.
This is the Trump doctrine. People are waking up worldwide. Now, don't forget about UK, France, Italy, other parts of the world that we haven't mentioned. This Trump doctrine, this Trump movement, make America great. What about make England great, France great, Italy great, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Iran, etc., etc. It's now called the Trump doctrine.
Tehran, freedom and democracy. This is what President Trump has stood up to the Chinese Communist Party, the dictators in Beijing. He stood up to the mullahs in Tehran, and now you're seeing it. You're seeing the people, whether it's at the ballot box in Hong Kong or in the protest. They just had a sweeping victory there a couple of weeks ago, a landslide victory for the Freedom and Democracy Party in Taiwan with a record turnout. And this is what the Chinese Communist Party trying to put their thumb on the scale, try to do it. In Tehran, the exact same thing. Remember, in Hong Kong and in Taipei, you're seeing the American flag. They're waving in these independence movements, these freedom movements. They've gotten President Trump, poses of President Trump as Superman or some sort of superhero. This is the Trump policy. You know, it's ironic that this week, we're going to have the signing of the Chinese trade deal. Right. At the same time they're going to vote to send the impeachment articles over to the House because these are inextricably linked. What President Trump did is go against the established order. The established order, the permanent political class's foreign policy was to appease these dictators, to appease Beijing, and that's why you saw the rise of China, to appease the mullahs in Iran, and that's why you saw this expansion of Iran with Hezbollah throughout the Middle East. Donald Trump said, this is not going to happen on my watch. We're going to stop here and now. He's taken a very Churchillian stand like Churchill took in the 1930s. It's the permanent political class and the John Kerrys, the Hillary Clintons, the foreign policy establishment, the Neville Chamberlains. They were the appeasers. He stopped the appeasement. He went to economic war. In the trade deals, he did economic war with the tariffs against China. He put economic sanctions on Tehran. Economic war is winning, and the people in the streets support Donald Trump.
Well, the Democrats don't see it that way, Steve. She is sending the articles for impeachment over to the Senate. We're going to have a Senate trial, and yet I can't figure out if, in fact, the president wants witnesses or doesn't want witnesses. What is this going to look like? Why is it that this freedom, this democracy, this movement in the economic growth story is not resonating on his critic?
In the last,
I think they've got a great point, but I think there's other things too. People are fed up with the political establishment and the status quo for a long time. They've just wanted a worldwide leader to show them the way. And Trump is a workaholic.
This is why they oppose him. The established order, first off, they hate him personally, but more, as importantly, they oppose his America First policies, because America First policies are resonating. Freedom and capitalism are resonating around the world, and that's what they oppose. And this is why he's continued to push this forward. Remember, when they put these articles of impeachment up, what they want to do is basically Bigfoot everything he's doing. They want to have, and this is, I think, the problem Mitch McConnell has, is that they see this kind of trial as being on C-SPAN, right, with some very tight legal arguments. I think President Trump, and the reason on Laura Ingraham the other night, he called for an expanded witness list, was he understands that the jury is not the Senate. The jury is the American people, but the audience is the world. They're watching on the streets of Taipei. They're watching in Hong Kong. They're watching in Tehran. They're watching and see if the established order can back down Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has the ability to win here. And that's why I've been calling it the trial of the century. He calls it the crime of the century. It is the crime of the century. It should be treated like that. And that's why on Laura Ingraham, he walked through the witnesses he wants. I think those witnesses have to be called.
The crime of the century, meaning that this was a coup. Kevin McCarthy was on several times over the last year, who called it the worst coup that we've seen ever in our history of our country. That's why the president called for these witnesses. Let's listen to the president on Laura Ingraham the other night in that great interview. Watch.
I'd like a trial. And
I've got to get to Laura's statement here. This is, let's see what she's got, but this is a part clip of that.
I'd love to have Sleepy Joe Biden. I'd love to have his son. I call him Where's Hunter. I've changed his first name to Where. Where's Hunter? I'd love to have the whistleblower who wrote a fake report.
Will we get there? Will we actually get all those people to testify? Because that will expose the crime of the century.
If they're making a big deal on the Democratic side, and some of these moderate senators are starting to call, they want Bolton and Mulvaney and the emails and vote at OMB, bring them. What do they have to show? Donald Trump did nothing wrong. This is why it's just like his support of the freedom movements throughout the world. And yesterday he tweets out in Farsi to support the people in the streets of Tehran. The established order were appeasers. They appeased the Chinese Communist Party. They appeased the mullahs. He stood up to that. And he showed you in the crime of the century, we should have the whistleblower up. We should have Hunter Biden up. And we should have the gentleman Horowitz who wrote the IG report. We should have those people up there. They should testify. If you have to trade off by having John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney, who cares? What are they going to say? So, right? What President Trump said at the very beginning of this, when we started our podcast, unity and substance. I did nothing wrong. This call was perfect. And I think the facts bear him out. It's one of the reasons, two reasons Nancy Pelosi slow-walked this. One was to find more evidence, okay, because they didn't have it. And they're afraid the guns are going to be turned back on them for a weak case. The second was to make sure she could Bigfoot President Trump's State of the Union message. That's why she slow-walked this entire thing. President Trump understands that the jury is the American people. The audience is the world. The world is watching this. That's why he has to take a hard stand, I believe.
Okay, so he says, Nancy Pelosi's trying to Bigfoot, trying to slow down or keep the State of the Union from happening. It's not going to happen. He's going to have the State of the Union anyhow with the impeachment trial. Remember, the end of this month, he's going to have the State of the Union address. And it's going to be a wowzer. And they're going to be shown for the hypocrites and the old system that has failed this country, this world, and many nations. Cost a lot of blood in Europe, in Middle East especially, in China, a lot of blood. Now, these people are guilty of abuses to the hilt, and they need to be exposed worldwide.
So you want him to delay the State of the Union. I got to ask you about that, because you are asking him, calling for him to make this announcement tomorrow morning. Let's take a short break. And I'm back with Steve Bannon. He is former White House chief strategist, host of the War Room podcast. You know, earlier I mentioned that comment by Kevin McCarthy where he said that we just witnessed the attempted coup to take down President Trump. It was the worst coup since Lincoln, is what he said on this program. And this is one of the reasons why you believe they're not going to stop attacking the president. You want the president to fight back.
This is a continual, this is the nullification project to nullify his presidency. And you see why. They were wrong. They are the appeasers. He's the Churchill figure. He has stood tall. That's why this is the trial of the century. It's about the crime of the century. It has to be big. This is not C-SPAN 3. This is going to be on global television. That's why I believe he has to have some of the House people like Lee Zeldin and Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan and Gates and
That's
these guys.
not going to happen, though,
Well,
is it?
I think he's still got opportunity to do that. I think the president needs that because they need to be, these fire breathers need to be there. We can't worry about the decorum of the Senate. This is about the direction of the United States of America. It's about the peace and prosperity of the world. Donald Trump's policy is...
Now, I'm going to end it here. He said we can't worry about the decorum of the Senate. I hope the Senate sees it that way. I don't know if it'll happen that way, but that's pretty powerful. Yeah, we're going to end this here. I think the State of the Union will happen. I don't know if the decorum of the Senate is going to be shaken up that much, but they need to bring on some really tough witnesses for Trump and show and expose these really negative and politically oriented witnesses and false witnesses against Trump. Again, this is Roger Martin from Billings, Montana. Good day. We're going to resume this with Rudy Giuliani. This is pretty potent, and this is on her show, Judge Judy's show.
Supreme Court can block this impeachment and the entire Senate trial, I should say, by declaring the impeachment unconstitutional.
Yes.
How do you do that? Explain.
Well, the general theory is, of course, that impeachment is in the hands of the House.
Right.
With unlimited power. Wrong. No such thing as unlimited power under the Constitution.
Okay.
Every constitutional power has limits. So what are the limits of impeachment? It's written right in order.
Now, again, this is good constitutional law. Every part of the government, the Supreme Court has limits, the Senate has limits, the House has limits, the President has limits, and so do the states. And so that's good constitutional law. That's the way it should be. The thing that hasn't talked about, and almost no one talks about, is those limits, all those limits that aren't there belong to the people. And we've been sitting on our hands for a long, long time and not doing anything to back the president or to back other righteous individuals that have tried to uphold the Constitution. Shame on us as citizens.
Article 2, Section 4. It has to be treason, bribery, high crime, misdemeanor, abuse of power, and the other ridiculous obstruction of Congress. You can't find it anywhere in 18 U.S.C. You can't find it under common law. You can't find it in Lithuanian law. It doesn't exist as crimes. So they have rendered...
Now, you said an important thing here. It doesn't even exist in common law. So they've made the Constitution null and void. And this has not been spoken about enough.
The Constitution of the United States and its words meaningless. It's as if they took the Constitution and struck out the words.
Well, let me ask you this, then what is the remedy? It's like indicting for a non-crime.
The remedy is to go before the Supreme Court of the United States and have it declared unconstitutional. Now, you say, well, there's nothing in...
Now, President Trump, I believe, should do that. I've said that before. I don't know if it's going to happen. I think President Trump has a bigger worldwide agenda here that we just talked about, that Bannon talked about. So, you know, I think there's a bigger agenda going on here.
In the Constitution that allows the Supreme Court to do it. There's also nothing in the Constitution, as you know from early days of constitutional law, that allows the Supreme Court to declare a law of Congress unconstitutional. Marshall made it up. Marshall didn't make it up. Marshall saw it as a necessary, almost obvious suggestion from the clash between the two branches of government. It was necessary to keep government working. Well, the same thing is true here. We have a clash between two branches of government. They are impeaching him for a non-crime, high crime, misdemeanor, low crime, small crime. He's saying you can't do that. Okay. If they are allowed to do the latter, and they can, the former rather, and they can impeach for anything, instead of having 230 years of history with two impeachments, We're going to have an impeachment every month. They'll impeach him when the next time he runs.
There's no question that
There's
if
no
this
limit
goes
on their
through,
impeachment power.
that the precedent is established. As long as you have the votes, you can impeach the guy because you don't like the color of his tie. As long as you've got a partisan vote. I agree, but what is the mechanism? How do you do it? And how do you say that maybe obstruction isn't a misdemeanor or a...
There are also no rules for a trial in the Supreme Court. All it says is, in the Senate, it says there shall be a trial in the United States Senate. Chief Justice presides. What happens at the beginning of the trial very often? The defense lawyer stands up and says, Your Honor, I move for the dismissal of the indictment because it fails to state a crime. Suppose somebody charged me with not looking nice tonight and brought me on trial before the New York Supreme Court. Well, I don't look nice tonight, but I'd move to have the case dismissed.
Well, can they
dismissed.
Can they do that with Mitch McConnell? You know, can the president's
Mitch
lawyer
sets the rules. The
Okay.
rules should say that this will be governed as if it were a trial in the United States District Court under the rules of the United States
And the
District
Supreme Court is not the
including the
arbiter.
evidentiary. The rules are set by the Senate.
Right.
Then the Chief Justice
Right.
interprets the rules.
Okay.
The Chief Justice will be given the power to dismiss. The Chief Justice, it will be dealt like a trial.
At what point does the Chief Justice come in and respond to a motion to dismiss?
At the very beginning of the trial, you would stand, if you had a case with a null indictment,
Right.
an indictment for a non-crime, an
Right.
indictment for eating ice cream,
Right.
you would say, Your Honor, this is an indictment by a grand jury. It purports to be voted by the grand jury and signed by a judge.
Right.
They must have been insane when they did it because it's not a crime. I move to dismiss the indictment.
Right.
The judge looks at it and says, Counselor, you're correct. Case dismissed.
Yeah, I used to do that. Now, what then
Now, why is that important? That's important because it'll never happen again.
Exactly.
The problem here is if we do go to trial, and he'll get acquitted, and they'll make fools out of themselves. I could even argue that politically it would be better to go to trial. They'll find out about Biden. They'll find out what a big crook Biden is. They'll find out that Biden just didn't make money in Iran, but he made money in China, and he made money in Iraq.
Right.
Everywhere, point man Biden,
Right.
money Biden.
Right. And then the whistleblower
I have
and
a
his
chart.
connections.
Make him point man, millions of dollars for the Biden crime family. Point man, Biden crime family, cash.
I got to move on, but let me ask you this. Let's assume that your request is granted and it is dismissed.
It's very, very
What is
bold.
the effect? It makes sense. What is the effect of the impeachment in the House? Can that ever be erased, or is that always there?
Well, then it becomes the only impeachment that's ever been dismissed for being non-constitutional. And I would say if it's non-constitutional, it's null and void.
Right. Right.
You know, it's like
I got
it shouldn't have happened. It was totally illegal.
So that should be.
We're going to end it there. That's as correct, as politically correct and constitutional correct as we can get. I'll give you these two links. They're well worth watching. It's Roger Martin from Village, Montana. Good day.